Your Excellency, Archbishop Jose Avelino Betancourt, Apostolic Nuncio to Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea, Your Excellencies, the Bishops of the Bamenda Ecclesiastical Province, Reverend Fathers, brothers and sisters, Mami Anna Foncha, First Lady of the former West Cameroon and founder of the Catholic Women's Association, members of the CWF here present, dear members of the Catholic Women's Association, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, through Mary, Jesus. Through Mary, Jesus. Through Mary, Jesus. We are gathered here this morning to praise and thank God for the wonders of His love and for all the great things that God has done for us through the Catholic Women's Association for the last 60 years since its foundation. We have heard in the Gospel reading that a sower went out to sow, and some seed fell among thorns, some on rocks, some on fertile soil, but others that fell some fell on infertile soil, but the others fell on fertile soil and brought forth a great harvest, 60-fold, 80-fold, 100-fold. It is very clear from this text that this sower who went out to sow was sowing in a random way. But the one who makes all things to grow made sure that the seed that fell on good soil bore fruit in great quantity. The sower is an instrument, but it is God who makes the seed to grow. And when the seed grows, ultimate thanks goes first to God, who is the source of all that is good and who is the power behind everything that grows from small to big. Today, we are celebrating what God has done in the life of the Cameroonian women through the Catholic Women's Association for the past 60 years. And we are gathered here not to celebrate what we have done for God, but what God has done for us. It was in 1963 that, like the great sower in the gospel text of this morning, Mami Anna Foncha went out to sow. Like the sower, she sowed the seed with faith and did not know what God was using her to do. She made herself an instrument in the hands of God and allowed God to use her to nurse, to water, and to make the Catholic Women's Association to grow. Last year, 2023, we celebrated the 100th birthday of Mami Anna Foncha, and we praise and thank God who has kept her to see this day. Mami Foncha, God bless you. And because God has kept Mami Foncha for 100 years to see this day, Mami is 101 this year. We are able to say, to God be the honor, glory, power, dominion, sovereignty forever and ever. The first recorded meeting of the Catholic Women's Association was held at Catholic Mission Buea Town on Saturday, the 4th of May, 1963. The following were present at that first meeting: Reverend Father Anthony van de Vlugt, parish priest; Reverend Father Nicholas van Bilderberg, assistant; Mami Anna Foncha, Mrs. Angela Lafon, Mrs. Joanna Ngong, Mrs. Josepha Mua, and Mrs. Dorothy Etoke Atabong. Mrs. Anna chaired the meeting, while Mrs. Josepha Mua took down the minutes. Verbal information holds that other founding members not present at this inaugural meeting were Mrs. Prudencia Chila, Mrs. Elizabeth Tamanjong, Mrs. Lucy Efiom, Mrs. Rosalina Noma, Mrs. Nathala Jua, Mrs. Regina Epule, Mrs. Imbene, and Mrs. Teresia Epo. We pay homage to these founding members of the Catholic Women Association. And for those who have gone before us marked with the sign of faith, may God grant them abundant rest in His kingdom. During this inaugural meeting of the CWA, it was agreed that a date should be set to officially launch the group in Buea Town Parish and thereby invite other women to join. The aims of the CWA on the day they started were outlined as follows: to foster unity and sisterly love among Catholic women, because when the members are united, they can play a more active role in the work of the church, as well as foster Christian principles in society. 2, to be involved in social activities like taking care of the poor, the sick, mission guests, raising funds for the church and schools, caring for the cemeteries, and giving adult education. Number 3, to be the link between all Catholic women's organizations in West Cameroon and in other parts of the world. However, it was during the fourth meeting, which took place on Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 1963, with 29 women in attendance, that a formal executive was put in place. Thus, the first executive that was voted into office was President, Mrs. Anna Foncha; Vice President, Mrs. Prudencia Chila; Secretary, Mrs. Dorothy Etoke Atabong; Vice Secretary, Ms. Emerencia Fonlon. This executive was to be in office for 6 months, and then new elections would be conducted. During the meeting of Wednesday, 9th of October 1963, which was attended by 22 members of the new point, the two members, the new point that was agreed upon was that members had to own a membership card which would carry the following information. The names of the patron of the association were identified as follows: Patron number 1, Right Reverend Bishop Jules Peters. Number 2, Mr. William Lebaga. Number 3, Mr. Simon Tamanjong. Number 4, Reverend Father Lucas Ade Atan. On this day, we pay homage to these great patrons who have also gone before us marked with the sign of faith, but whom we know worked so hard to help the CWA at its original stages to grow. We also pay homage to the second generation of bishops who have been called to eternity: Archbishop Paul Vetzekov, Bishop Pius Awa, and Cardinal Christian Tumi, for the important role they played in helping the Catholic Women's Association all these 60 years. In the meeting of Wednesday, 23rd October, the women agreed on the motto of the association. 2 suggestions came to the floor, although none of these suggestions exist now. The first one, serve with joy. The second, activities, not words. And so the Catholic Women Association started with the motto, activity, not words. The women that then agreed that membership cards should be printed and distributed to active members. I use this chance to solemnly announce to the Catholic Women's Association that the bishops of Bapek have set up a group of historians who have come out with the authentic history of Catholic Women's Association. And we are going to publish this to you in their next Congress, which begins tomorrow. Every Jubilee is a time for stock taking. Every Jubilee is a time for stock taking and of evaluation, and a time for looking into the future. It was in August 1964 that Bishop Julius Peters signed the decree establishing the Catholic Women's Association. And that is why we are celebrating 1964 as the birth of the Catholic Women's, because that was the date of the signature of the decree establishing the Catholic women. Thanks be to God that immediately after this Jubilee celebration, the delegates of the Catholic Women's Association are going into their ordinary Congress to evaluate their work and vote leaders who will lead the association for the next few years. I use this chance on behalf of the bishops of Cameroon to thank the Catholic Women's Association for all the work that they have done in the Catholic Church of this country and beyond for the past 60 years. You have taken very active part in the spiritual growth of the lives of the women in our church. You have worked hard to improve the condition of women and the girl child everywhere. You have done all within your powers to make your parishes and Christian communities true families of God. You have worked hard for the preservation of family values, and you have defended the authentic teaching of the Catholic Church on marriage and the family. You have contributed greatly to the formation of priests in our local churches, either through financial contributions or bringing material food and other necessary items to our seminaries. You have been prominent in all occasions of the church, from episcopal or priestly ordinations to final professions of religious men and women, and any other occasions that are organized by the church at any level. You have promoted the Marian spirituality, and you have done your best to imitate the virtues of the Blessed Virgin Mary, who is your mother and your model. We call you mothers of the church, and indeed, that is what you have been for the past 60 years. May God bless you abundantly forever and ever. Amen. The Catholic Women's Association has grown over the years, and many things have evolved. Today that we are celebrating the Diamond Jubilee, we are evaluating the growth of this group from its original objectives. You have done your best to keep this group alive, and what started as a small group of women has grown to about 20,000 registered women all over Cameroon and other countries of the world, including the United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, and everywhere. Very soon, the CWA will be like MTN, everywhere you go. When Pope Francis launched the Year for the Consecrated Life in Rome in 2015, he urged all the members of the consecrated life to look at the past with gratitude, look at the present with love, and look to the future with hope. When we look back at how the Catholic Women Association started and all the wonderful things that God has accomplished in his church through this group, we can only give thanks to God, whose power working in us can do infinitely more than we can ever ask or imagine. When we look back at the women who started this group, we can only say, not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory. Like we sing in one of the common hymns, this occasion is a thanksgiving of amazing grace. When we look at the present works of the Catholic Women's Association, we smile with love. This group has generated a lot of love among the women, and this love has flowed into the society. Pope Francis says, look at the present with love, and the presence of so many women and invited guests at this celebration, and the great joy that is flowing among us is the sign that we are living the presence with love. Finally, when we are celebrating these 60 years of our existence, we are not afraid of tomorrow because we have seen yesterday and we love today. This is what it means to look at the future with hope. We are confident that tomorrow will be better than today. We are confident that tomorrow will bring us more members. We are confident that the future of this association will be bright. And our hope lies in the promise that God will never abandon his people. And that the Blessed Virgin Mary will continue to cover this association with her maternal mantle so that it continues to grow from strength to strength. Dear members of the Catholic Women's Association, you don't belong to this group by chance, but you belong to this group by God's choice and God's call. It is God himself who called you into this group, and he has a mission for every one of you. Like the prophet Jeremiah wrote in the first reading, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you through and through. Before you came to birth, I consecrated you, and have appointed you as a prophet to the nations in your societies. As you begin a new age and look to the future, my message to all the Catholic women gathered here this morning and those who are following us through the media is that you should be women of hope. Woman A. I say woman A. Women are creatures of great resilience. And if women give up on something, it means that there is no way for redemption. We see that no matter how bad a child is, the women never lose hope. Sometimes, when the men torment the women, they never lose hope. When society becomes hostile and even violent, women never lose hope. This is a great virtue that we have seen in the women, especially during this time that we are going through a lot of difficulties in our regions of the northwest, the southwest, the far north, and the east of Cameroon. You have gone through a lot of difficulties, but our women have not lost hope because they are women of hope. Woman A. Even when we go to the markets, we see women still doing their business, trying to look for means for survival for their families. They don't lose hope. When we go to the farms, we see the women still active in their farms, planting all kinds of crops, working hard to make sure that they have food to feed their families. They have hope for their families. They are the hope of their families. Woman A. The economic development that we see around is hinged on the hope of the women. Many of the women gathered here this morning have homes because they are women of hope. Although husbands are standing in front, you realize that if we go deep, many of the houses that families live in have not been built by men, but by women. The women are the hopes of their families. Woman A. We look at women in the Bible who were the hope of their people. In Exodus chapter 1, verse 15 to 21, we see two women called Shiphrah and Puah, who were the Hebrew midwives. When Pharaoh asked the women, all the midwives, to kill all Hebrew male at birth, these two women, Shiphrah and Puah, did not do it because they feared God. That is how, when Moses was born, they did not kill him, but they put him in a basket and floated him along the Nile. These two women were the hope of Israel, and because of them, the Jews grew in numbers. These women were the hope of Israel. Woman A. In Joshua chapter 2, verse 1 to 24, we see a woman called Rahab who saved the lives of the spies of the Jews that Joshua sent to spy out the land of Jericho, which God was going to give to the Israelites. When the people of the town knew that these men had come into town, they wanted to kill them. But Rahab, who was a prostitute, hid these women in her house for 3 days and 3 nights, and later on sent them out of the city wall using a rope. Rahab became the hope of the people of Israel, the new Israel, and we see her name in the first generation of the genealogy of Jesus. This woman brought hope to the wandering children of God. Woman A. In the book of Ruth, we see the story of this courageous girl whose mother-in-law was called Naomi. How Ruth did not abandon her mother-in-law in times of difficulties, although she had lost her husband. Finally, she abandoned her land and followed her mother-in-law to Israel. And today, she is also among the few women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus. Women bring hope to the future. Woman A. In the book of Judges, chapter 4 and 5, we see the courageous woman, Deborah, who was a judge in Israel. How she collaborated with God to deliver her people from the hands of the Canaanites. Women always give hope to the desperate and to the hopeless, just like Deborah did for Israel. Woman A. In the book of Esther, we see how the prayer of one woman saved the nation from destruction. She did not fear, but confronted King Ahasuerus. And because of that prayer, the king revoked the decree of extermination that he had signed for the Jews. Esther became the symbol of salvation of the Jews that were supposed to be exterminated. Women give hope when hope is lost. Woman A. My dear women, in the current socio-political crisis that we are going through in the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon, the women still remain the hope of this nation. It is the women who would save us through their prayers, through their perseverance, through their determination, and to build fraternity again. Women, there are many things happening in our country today which are not good. But it is you who will save this country. There's a lot of tension mounting in our country around various regions for various reasons. Thanks be to God. The Catholic Women's Association exists in all the 10 regions of this country and in practically all the 26 dioceses of this country. Women, You are the ones to save this country. You have seen what your fellow women have done in the scriptures. You are called to do the same for our nation today. You are called to be the prophets. You are called to be the ones to lead us from hopelessness to hope through your prayers and your witnessing. Dear mothers of the church, you are ambassadors of hope to our society. And you have become ambassadors of hope through the painful experiences and the sufferings that many of you have gone through. Like St. Paul says in the letter to the Romans, these sufferings bring patience. Patience brings perseverance. And perseverance brings hope. And this hope will not deceive us. Romans chapter 5, verse 4 to 5. We are putting our hope in the women. And we know that our hope will not deceive us. On this great day, every Catholic woman can join St. Paul to say, as we heard in the second reading of this Mass, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing. For he chose us before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless before him." The destination of every Catholic woman is not in this world, but in the world to come. And that is why God has called us to be blameless and holy before him. Our gaze is fixed on heaven, and we all should dream of the great banquet of heaven that awaits all God's faithful children. On that day, every Catholic woman will join with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Saint Perpetua and Felicitas, Saint Therese of Lisieux, Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, Saint Joan of Arc, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Agnes, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Clare of Assisi, and all other holy women. We are waiting for that day when the first Catholic woman will be beatified in the Catholic Church in Rome. We have many who have gone before us marked with the sign of faith. We are waiting for that day that when they are singing the litany of the saints in the Catholic Church, I just give some examples. We'll go back to our original list of the founding members, those who have died. We are hoping that one day we shall hear in the litany of the saints, Sancta Prudentia Chila, Sancta Dorothea Tokeata Bon, Sancta Emerencia Fonlon, Santa Lucy Efium. Mami Anna Foncha, we don't want to kill you before time, but we are waiting for that day when they'll insert also in the litany, Mama Anna Foncha. May God bless the Catholic women forever and ever.